All right, good morning, class. So what we're going to do today is take our finished 1-point perspective names and turn them into a really nice shaded or colored finished version. These are going to be a really great thing. You can hang them on your walls in your bedrooms, you can hang them on your door. These end up looking really nice when you're finished with them. You're going to have 3 options with how you choose to go about shading your name. So the first option is going to be, if you have colored pencils at home, you can work with just a single colored pencil and shade it based on an imaginary light source that I'm going to show you how to set up. So this one I've just done green, and I have 4 different basic values, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, establishing a light source. This is another good student example using just a single colored pencil. Or if you want to be really super colorful, a second option that you can work with is establishing a color scheme where you choose different colors to represent each plane. So here, instead of a single color, I've chosen one color for each of the 4 directions of the planes. I've chosen lime green for all the front faces. I've chosen a light teal for all of the left walls, and a dark green for all the right walls, and then an even darker blue for all the bottoms. So you can choose a different color for each plane, still using that same idea of a light source, what's going to be your lightest plane, medium, darker, and darkest plane. Now, if you don't have any colored pencils at home, this assignment can still be done using just a regular plain old pencil. So you can start working on developing your shading techniques. So this is your third option, is to use just your pencil and create that imaginary light source, thinking about what's going to be your lightest side, darker, darker, and darkest. What we're going to do in order to start is decide on an imaginary light source in order to establish what planes or what faces of our 3-dimensional forms should be the lightest, medium, and then the darkest. So we're going to end up usually with 4 basic values, depending on where you want your light source to be coming from. You can choose whatever direction you'd like. You could have your light source coming up from like the bottom right hand, bottom left, top right, whatever sort of a direction you want. I think for this particular example, I'm going to have mine coming in from like the front right hand side. Now the trick with light rays is that they always come in parallel, and they're always going to hit every object, every letter exactly the same way. So consistency across each letter is going to be really important. The first thing we're going to do is decide what plane is going to be the lightest value. So for that direction, would it be the front, the right side, or the bottom plane? I think for me, my front side is going to be my lightest value, so I'm just going to label that with a little 1 just to remind me. Now, once I've decided that that's going to be my lightest value, the front plane, that's going to be true for every other letter in my name. They're all going to be my lightest value. Then I think the next lightest value would be probably the right-hand side, would be getting a little bit less light, but still it would be fairly light, so I'm going to label the right wall a 2. It'll be a little bit darker. So on this letter, this is a 2, but also this side panel up here is also a right-facing wall, so that will be a 2. Now if I move over to follow that through, that little tiny side wall there as well, that will be a 2. And if I move across to start doing the same thing with all of my letters, every right-facing wall, the E will have several, that little side, and that side, as well as these 2 inside walls will be a value 2 as well. For my N, this wall, and even though it's super, super tiny and skinny, I can't even label it, but that right-hand wall will be as well. Then the next thing I have to figure out is probably the darkest value for this first letter is going to be the underside. So if it's sort of coming from the front right, the bottom is not going to get much light at all, so I'm going to label that with a 3. And on this particular J, we have a bottom side here and a bottom side here. Now if I follow that through consistently, on my E, I'll have a value 3, a value 3, and a value 3, because all of those planes are the bottom face of that letter. When I come over here to the N, we're gonna get a little bit more complicated. We're gonna see that this is a value 3, and this one, same thing, same thing. Now on my A, I also have this underside here, which is also facing in the same direction, so that will be a value 3. Now, as we move across, and my direction from the vanishing point here, we can see the right-hand side, but as we rotate away from that vanishing point, we begin to start to see the left-hand side. So if my light source is coming from the front right, this left wall will actually be my darkest. It's just that on this J over here, I can't see the left walls. So this will be a value 4 on my A. Anything that's on the left-hand side, whether it's a tilted side like this one, or even an underside like this one, or a vertical wall like this one, 4. This very skinny wall will be a 4. And on the A over here, this, even though this is slanted downwards, we're going to count that as a 4. And technically, on the inside of the A, this would also be a 4 because that wall is facing in the same direction. So I'm going to now go back into my letter J, and I'm going to show you how we're going to set up and create our shading. For the J, I'm going to start off, I always like to sort of hold, whether I'm using colored pencils or a regular pencil, I always like to sort of wear a little bit of a flat point, seeing the angle that I'm holding it onto a scrap sheet of paper. And I'm going to start off just really lightly with my lightest value. And I like to shade, especially when I'm shading really lightly, with just a series of little tiny circles. Just shading right up to the edges. You can edge stuff in if you want to use straight lines to do that. So now that's going to be my lightest value, and then I'm going to be moving over to my right sides and shading my second value. So I'm going to go just a little bit darker, and I'm going to show you another trick that I like to use too. Sometimes when I'm shading, I will sometimes use that other hand, the edge of that fingernail, almost as like a bumper, to make sure that I don't go out beyond the lines. So if I've got like a large area like this, if I'm shading with those circles, or even if I'm shading with lines, that can help me make sure I don't go outside of them. Can help you control your pencil work a little bit more. And I just gradually kind of work and build up that value until it's nice and smooth. I really want this whole plane to sort of read as a nice flat value. So just shade right up to those edges. Sometimes I edge those in just to make sure. And I also want to make sure I have enough of a value jump between my first value and my second value to make sure that it's going to look nice and crisp and sharp. And then I can't forget this little section right there. So that looks pretty good. So my front face is my lightest, my right faces are my second lightest, and now my third face is going to be my darkest shade on this particular letter. Now, this is a good point where I can sort of show you. If you notice here and here between the second wall, the right side, and then the darker bottom face, I've let those get a little bit too dark. So if you are using colored pencil, you can really lightly, with an eraser, lift up some of that color. If I want to make it a little bit more contrasting, I just went a smidge bit too dark in a few little spots. So I can lighten that, lift up just a little bit of that wax from the colored pencil, and then go back in and shade. And that gives me a little bit more of a value contrast, making those a little bit of a closer match.